3 years ago, the man proposed to the woman. He promised that no matter how long it took, he would wait for her to marry him. 3 years have passed. Today, he took out a diamond ring and asked her, "You have the best taste. Can you take a look? Would Noela like this style?" Anne froze on the spot. Noela is her sister. The man who once passionately pursued her, saying he would wait forever, had changed his heart, and now proposed to her sister? The maid, upon hearing this news, was furious, saying he was a jerk, and suggested calling the younger lady to confront him. But after a brief moment of disappointment, the woman picked up her files and continued working. To her, love was something she could take or leave. Inheriting the family business was her top priority. Being reborn as the heiress of the richest empire, the Yudin Trading Company. She, as the eldest daughter and successor, was very content. In her past life, she was just an ordinary woman. Her biggest dream was to be a wealthy second generation, to experience wealth and the thrill of competing for inheritance. One misstep into water, and her dream became reality. She was reborn into a novel she had read, with her father as the richest man, and she became the noble daughter of a count's family, named Adele. Adele was highly motivated. She studied at least 20 hours every day, which skyrocketed her father's favorability towards her, and he dedicated himself to grooming her as the future successor. Perhaps this is why she became overly engrossed in her career, and ignored love. But was Noela truly innocent? She knocked on Adele's door, with a pitiful expression, and immediately apologized. "I'm really sorry, sister. I never dreamed brother Gel would like me. It's all my fault. If only you could forgive me." But before she could finish her sentence, Adele issued a dismissal order and sent her out. No one knew better than Adele what kind of person Noela was. Just then, there was a noise outside the window. A man with black hair and red eyes climbed in. He was her devoted little helper. Whenever she furrowed her brows, his expression would change with hers. "Shall I take care of him for you? As long as you say the word, I'll get rid of him." Previously, after someone insulted Adele in public, the next day, that person lost an arm. This is Caden. To be precise, he's her half-brother. Her obsessive half-brother. She remembers the first time she met him. He was covered in blood, held by the butler. And the first thing he said to Adele was, "I beg you, don't hurt me. I'm not interested in money or inheritance." Seeing the frail boy, Adele felt compassion. She not only named him Caden, but also protected him as he grew, until he took over the family's underground business, silently eliminating those who only cared about money. When Caden heard about his sister's heartbreak, his eyes darkened instantly. Adele quickly intervened. "Don't act recklessly. I still have use for him." Caden gave a wicked smile and prepared to leave through the window. But before he left, he asked her, "That vile woman Noela, how long do you plan to keep her around?" Adele remained silent, having read the novel thoroughly. How could she not know about Noela's villainous character? She just didn't want to fuss over someone fated to die. In the original story, Noela was actually supposed to be the protagonist. Her overly saintly nature was disliked by readers of dramatic fiction, forcing the author to turn her into a vile supporting character. And her eventual fate was a tragic death at 20. Adele, focused on wealth, tolerated her to a certain extent, hoping she could at least live to 20. But at the family's regular banquet the next day, unexpectedly, Noela appeared hand in hand with her new lover. The guests were shocked, thinking, wasn't this the man who had publicly wooed her sister, now showing up with a younger sister at the banquet? The air was thick with gossip. Adele didn't want to be the center of attention, so she went to the balcony for some air. But Noela quickly followed her. "Sister, I'm sorry. I even told brother Gel we should arrive separately." This man was rather ordinary looking, yet he moved between the two sisters. 3 years ago, he proposed to the older sister, declaring his love, and vowed solemnly that he would marry her. Now, he was holding her younger sister's hand at the banquet. However, the older sister was very magnanimous. She wasn't angry, and even offered blessings to the perfect couple before her. After all, her sister wouldn't live long, and her dream was to inherit the family business and become wealthy. Though she had known the man since childhood, he and her sister truly loved each other. Why not let them be and free herself? Adele even thoughtfully considered her sister's future. When father returns, I'll explain everything to him. But blinded by her confidence, she failed to notice her sister Noela's sympathetic gaze, and also overlooked how the noble ladies who once surrounded her were now flocking to her sister's side, until a man appeared. He was Adele's cousin. With a hint of mockery, he asked, "So, you can't get married now, right? But you must know, the heir must be married, right?" This news hit her like a bolt from the blue. Without waiting for the banquet to end, Adele went to find the butler, and questioned why she had never heard of this rule. Perhaps everyone assumed that, as the eldest daughter, and someone highly favored by the count for her abilities, even without a political marriage at her coming of age, she would still marry young Master Gel. Surely, they would walk down the aisle together. But Gel chose the second young lady. At this moment, an idea sparked in Adele's mind. She asked the butler if her father had left any messages before leaving. The butler replied that the master had sent a letter a few days ago, instructing them to prepare to hold the eldest lady's wedding upon his return. Only this would secure her position as heir, and the letter was handed to him by the second young lady. Adele, always meticulous, had been outwitted by the sister she looked down upon. She clenched her fist. I might as well just. The older sister considered killing her younger sister. She could accept her sister taking her fiancé, but not her rightful inheritance as heir, taken away by her sister. Love isn't as important as wealth. The maid advised her to stay calm. They could complain to the count when he returned, but Adele knew her father was cold and ruthless, and only cared about profit. If he knew his older daughter's man was taken by the younger one, he would just say, well, the younger daughter really has skills. Then, Adele suddenly had a flash of inspiration. I'll just find a new marriage partner. Three-legged frogs are hard to find, but two-legged men are everywhere. As long as she found someone before her father's return, who was taller, more handsome, wealthier, more capable, and morally sound than Jel, she would have every reason to tell her father that she dumped Jel and found someone better. But as she listed the criteria, Adele became discouraged. Where could I find such a person? The maid was also troubled. Men of that quality are probably only the paladins at the cathedral. This remark immediately sparked Adele's DNA. The next day, she was on a husband-hunting carriage. On the way, the maid asked if she was serious. Adele looked solemn. I have to inherit the family business, so I must bring a husband back. But as the maid looked at the pile of gold bars, she asked why the young lady was bringing so much money to find a husband. Adele had a solid reason. I can't go empty-handed, can I? And to delay the count's return to the estate, she even lied to her brother Caden, telling him a small fib, asking him to blow up the bridge her father would have to cross. The maid couldn't help but wonder, why not have the young master bring someone back? Adele recalled her possessive and obsessive brother, who always exuded a murderous aura around any man near her. If he found out about this, he'd only ask her, how would you like him to die? But in front of Adele, the fierce Caden was as gentle as a big loyal dog. Soon, Adele and her party arrived at the cathedral. Adele and her entourage arrived at the cathedral. Unfortunately, the bishop who could help her find a match was not there. Adele didn't want to leave empty-handed, so she knocked on another door. Upon entering, it was pitch dark. Only a deep voice echoed faintly, accompanied by a faint resonance. In order to inherit the family business, the daughter of the count embarked on a husband-hunting journey. And now, she seemed to have reached her destination. In front of her stood a man with white hair and emerald eyes, his presence highlighted by the sunlight, like a deity descending to earth. Adele was utterly stunned, until the man's repeated calls brought her back to her senses. Before the man could introduce himself, Adele, using her sharp mind and various small details, deduced his identity. He was the leader of the knights. A pleasure to meet you. Her words immediately made the man's gaze change. He warily asked how she knew. Little did he know, with just one look, she had discerned his identity, and noticed he seemed to have arrived here recently. Otherwise, with such divine looks, girls would have already broken down the cathedral doors, dragging him home to be their husband. Right, a husband. Looking at the man's handsome face, and listening to his steady voice, Adele suddenly had a bold idea. She had come here hoping the bishop would help her find a match. Someone suitable to marry her. So why couldn't it be this young man before her? He was young, and already successful, serving as a representative of the cathedral. With this thought, Adele steadied her emotions, deciding to probe a bit. My name is Adele. May I know how to address you? The man politely responded. Gillian. Adele continued. You look really young. You must be about my brother's age, right? The man thought she was dismissing him for being too young, so he frowned slightly. I'm 27 this year. Adele felt another wave of joy inside. But the question was, you're so handsome, I assume your wife must be a beauty as well? The man responded coldly. I'm unmarried. For the first time in her atheist life, Adele felt like believing in a higher power. Thank you for bringing him before me. But she had one more pressing question. Do you like blonde hair? Maybe like that of an angel. This time, before she could finish, the man interrupted her. Firstly, Gillian disliked blondes. Secondly, he believed there were no angels in this world. Adele had no further concerns. She took a step forward, serious and determined. Let's get married. To marry him, she promised that whatever he desired, gold, jewels, fame, or fortune, she would use her family's resources to help him get everything he wanted. The man was a bit dumbfounded. They had only just met. Adele, however, chattered on, saying all she had learned from his micro-expressions and details about Gillian so far. If that's not enough, we can also take it slow. But unsurprisingly, the man rejected her proposal. Even though he didn't pursue love, he understood that Adele was doing this for the inheritance, and needed a suitable partner for marriage. It was essentially a contract marriage, where both would benefit, but Gillian still politely declined her offer. Adele was disappointed. She knew this man wouldn't be easy to win over, but she didn't expect it to be this hard. For now, she had no choice but to leave. As she walked away, a crack appeared in Gillian's expression at her proposal. At the conditions she proposed, it made him question his own beliefs. What am I really pursuing? Just then, Adele suddenly stopped walking. She didn't want to give up yet, so she turned back with a smile. How about I pave a path of gold for you here? After all, a path of flowers is too cliché. Apparently, this wealthy older sister chases people by throwing money at them. To her surprise, this time Gillian didn't stay silent. He called for assistance, and had Adele escorted out. Outside the cathedral, the maid saw her lady being led out, and hurriedly asked what had happened. Behind her, Gillian's polite voice sounded. The crescent moon has recently risen. There might be monsters nearby. Let me escort you to the road. Such a cold and aloof young man. All Adele wanted was to run away. She curtsied politely, refused his offer, and dragged her maid away. But after turning a corner, she sneakily returned. Her father had taught her since she was young to never give up until she achieved her goal. And if she didn't bring back a marriage candidate, she might not even have a place to go back to. After seeing her off, Gillian's room was suddenly filled with knights. Adele's presence had stirred up the entire knight squad. After all, she was beautiful and came from a wealthy family. Her family had been wealthy for generations. Just holding her hand or marrying her could propel one's life to new heights. Listening to their discussion, Gillian felt irritated and sent them out, but one comment made him pause, and after a moment, he stood up. The man was a cold, proud holy knight, not fond of women, preferring to view himself as divine, while the woman came from a family of generations of wealth. She didn't believe in gods, only in money. So when the man first saw her, he felt their energies didn't match, and kicked her out of the cathedral, only to hear the knights discussing the monsters roaming outside. When the passing carriages became quite dangerous, Gillian suddenly rushed out the door. It seemed his resolve was starting to crack, but after only a few steps, he ran right into the high priestess returning with 2 volunteers. Something urged him to take a closer look, only to see a head of glossy black hair flowing in the wind. Then Adele greeted him with a radiant smile. "We meet again." Seeing her return, Gillian left without a word. The maid nervously asked, "Are we really staying here?" Originally, Adele was taking a gamble, but after seeing him again, she knew she had made the right bet. Someone who was always so cold actually showed a hint of hesitation because of her. This discovery made her smile involuntarily. Rebecca, a priestess nearby, became displeased. She didn't like Adele, whose eyes were full of ambition. It was inappropriate for her to be in this sacred cathedral. So after Adele and her maid left, she spoke poorly of her in front of the high priestess. But Adele continued to enthusiastically explore the surroundings, admiring the well-built bodies of the young knights training. "We made the right choice coming here. This place is heaven." Just then, a voice sounded behind her. It was Leonard, the deputy commander of the knights, who didn't hide his admiration for Adele. He complimented her beauty, and offered his assistance anytime she needed, wishing he could connect with her immediately. But just as the two were getting along well, Gillian appeared, with a chillingly stern expression. "You seem quite free. Is the training too easy?" Under the captain's intense pressure, Leonard slipped away, leaving just the two of them. Gillian advised her to go home, telling her there was no reason to stay here, and he wouldn't change his mind to accept her. Adele gave a soft smile and said, "Do you really think I'm staying here to win you over?" Hearing this, Gillian frowned. "Then, why did you come back?" They had only met once, and she asked him to marry her. After being rejected, she changed her approach. "Must bring back a marriage candidate. Honestly, it doesn't have to be you." This response genuinely stunned Gillian. He thought she stayed at the cathedral to pursue him, but now it seemed he had overthought it. As he left, he felt a mix of emotions. But after he was gone, the maid asked her lady, "Have you really given up on the captain?" Adele gave a sly smile. How could someone who's seen the sun settle for a little flame? In other words, it was all to lower his guard, to attract his attention, making him think she'd shifted her focus, so she could get closer to him. But unfortunately, he had no idea what she was planning. During the task assignment, Rebecca led Adele and her maid to a small room, pointing at a mountain of plates and bowls. "Please have all of these cleaned today." Rebecca didn't hide her animosity towards Adele at all. She disliked Adele's ostentatiousness, and hated her interest in the captain. So her goal was clear, to make things difficult for Adele, hoping she would leave on her own. Adele saw through Rebecca's intentions, but smiled and accepted the task. She didn't get angry, understanding why Rebecca was upset. After all, causing a scene here wouldn't help her find a husband. So Adele tied her hair back, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Until evening, the usually empty dining hall was packed. It was clear that the knights were eager to catch a glimpse of her. Their excitement was evident, and amidst the crowd, Gillian's figure appeared. Unlike the knights who wanted to get close to Adele, his presence exuded a cold pressure, as if warning Adele, "Stay away from my knights." But as the meal was ending, there was still no sign of Adele. The high priestess asked Rebecca, "Why hasn't Miss Adele come yet?" Rebecca stole a quick glance at Gillian, then innocently replied, "The task I assigned wasn't difficult. Maybe she's just not used to manual labor. It might have taken her longer." Rebecca added with a hint of malice, "Or perhaps the lady intentionally didn't come. After all, she grew up in luxury. She's probably not used to this simple food." Hearing this, Gillian stood up to leave, when suddenly, a bright voice rang out. He stopped in his tracks. A woman who paves the way with gold for a first meeting, who turns wine into waterfalls at home, was now carrying a tray of potatoes. "Mind moving over a bit?" Rebecca looked flustered. First, she was caught bad-mouthing Adele. Second, she couldn't believe that Adele had managed to wash 400 to 500 dishes in just a few hours. Upon seeing her, Gillian, who had intended to leave, returned to his seat. When Adele asked why he was staying, he replied, unfazed, "I'm not full yet." Adele laughed to herself. He was clearly staying to keep an eye on her, thinking she had ulterior motives toward the knights. Little did he know he was the real target. But for now, she was too hungry to care. She peeled a boiled potato, and took a big bite, relishing the taste with delight. Only heaven knew, she was starving. Beside her, Rebecca had regained her composure. "There's no need to force yourself to eat this. You probably don't even care for this food." Adele thought, "Oh, she's just begging for it now." She then began by chiding Rebecca. "How could you speak that way about potatoes? Every bit of food is hard-earned." She then addressed Rebecca's previous comments. The wine waterfalls at her home were to support the wine market. The fruits grown at her estate were cultivated in greenhouses to improve quality, then sold at affordable prices to the public. "As a prominent family, we have a responsibility to bring a better life to the people of the South." Every word from Adele seemed to flaunt her wealth, and subtly mock Rebecca. "You naive, inexperienced fool." Faced with such overwhelming wealth, Rebecca grew furious. When Adele stood up, Leonard asked if she was full. Adele replied with a smile, I was going to have some bread, but it seems I came too late, it's all gone. No sooner had she spoken, and bread was offered from all directions. Adele took none of it. She simply said she'd try to come earlier next time and left. Gillian didn't say a word, but watching her walk away, he suddenly felt that the lively dining hall seemed to grow cold in an instant. The high priestess noticed his reaction and asked if something was wrong. Gillian replied, insincerely, nothing, just feels a bit noisy. The high priestess pointed to the bread in his hand. Then who was that bread for? This man had never met a girl like her. So crude, luxurious on the outside, and shameless. Who would suggest marriage upon their first meeting? Let's get married, she had said. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about her. I must be going mad. Gillian knew that she wasn't right for him, and that her presence was a disadvantage to him. But his once calm life had somehow been stirred by her presence. Otherwise, why would he have picked up bread? And she mentioned wanting bread, as if waiting to give it to her. This change in feelings made Gillian uneasy. Until he attained that goal, he couldn't afford distractions, so he put on his cloak and began a mental countdown. Only 13 days left. During this time, no matter what she said, no matter how much her eyes sparkled, he had to hold back. Suddenly, the rustling in the bushes interrupted his thoughts, and he saw Adele holding a bamboo basket, muttering complaints to herself, and she turned around. She was initially surprised to see Gillian, but then she composed herself. Seeing his sleeves wet from the waterfall spray, she silently thanked Rebecca for this setup. If not for Rebecca's scrutiny, checking her dishwashing after dinner, and finding no fault, she wouldn't have been sent out at midnight to gather branches, to make washing tools, and thus wouldn't have had this encounter. But as she nervously explained it was all a coincidence, the man just stared at her silently. Until, finally, don't you know there are monsters here? What exactly are you so determined about? Adele put away her playful expression. She told Gillian, everyone has struggles that others can't understand. Things he couldn't comprehend were tied to her life's purpose. For this purpose, she would even move mountains, not just gather branches. In the moonlight, her unwavering resolve shone like a beacon, as if it reached Gillian's heart. He took the bamboo basket from her hands. Let's go. Didn't you say it was late, and you needed to head back? Adele was briefly stunned, then couldn't help but say, you're going to make me misunderstand. As Gillian turned, a subtle smile appeared on his face. Then feel free to misunderstand me. He was a pure-hearted, innocent man, while her twisted, obsessive brother was also somehow hers to keep. In the moonlight, the saintly knight who usually kept others at a distance was now showing a rare smile. Adele thought her eyes were deceiving her, and leaned in to take a closer look. But Gillian suddenly quickened his pace, and dashed away. From then on, whenever she got close, the man would quicken his pace, and the two of them walked back to the cathedral together. Looking at the man's indifferent face once again, she was convinced the smile was her imagination. As they said goodbye, Adele told him to go back early, and reminded him to be careful on the way. Gillian immediately asked, "You worried about me?" To which she laughed heartily. "I'm probably more dangerous than the monsters out there." This direct comment left him stunned. Adele simply walked away with a smile, leaving him to ponder it alone. In the following days, Rebecca tried hard to find Adele's faults, but found nothing. In the entire cathedral, everyone seemed to be singing Adele's praises. How could she possibly drive her away? Glancing over at Gillian beside her, she felt relieved, grateful that their captain was wise enough not to be swayed by this wicked woman's beauty. She then took the chance to complain. As a follower of God, her behavior is far too frivolous. Gillian looked at the woman surrounded by knights. Yes, she was indeed frivolous. Have they all gone mad? Rebecca suggested that such a dangerous person should be assigned someone to watch over her. She thought of Michael, but Gillian said he was too indecisive. What about the brave Leonard? They glanced at Leonard, who was wagging his tail in front of Adele. Useless, no matter who Rebecca suggested next. Gillian rejected each one firmly, until finally, he said reluctantly, "No choice, I'll just have to keep an eye on her myself." Rebecca was deeply moved. Gazing up at him in admiration, she thought, "Oh my, what a reliable man." Unaware of all this, Adele looked at the letter from home with concern. Her younger brother Caden, not having received her letters for so long, had gone mad. He cared for no one else, only his sister. For her sake, he'd even blown up the bridge their father was crossing. All because his beloved sister said she needed something. So even though debris from the landslide had scarred his face, Caden's only thought was, finally, it's over. I can go home and see my sister. Seeing the family seal on the letter, Caden was displeased. Why hasn't my sister written back? His sharp eye noticed that the last 3 letters weren't written by his sister, and he couldn't help but worry. The attendant beside him explained that perhaps the lady was simply too busy, and if anything serious happened, Master Gerald would inform him immediately. But Caden didn't buy it. No matter how busy she is, she'd still write a word or two herself, because she knows me well. The unspoken end of his thought was, without news from her, I go mad. But Adele was genuinely busy, trying to win over Caden's future brother-in-law. Ever since Gillian volunteered to monitor her, his first task was to assign her a new role. Apparently, washing dishes and peeling potatoes was unfit for her, so he handpicked a job caring for children, thinking she'd have little interaction with the knights, and it would be easy on her. But he overlooked one detail. Children sent to the cathedral often had a rebellious streak, especially one boy, who, being the count's only son, and with a mother who was a believer, was especially arrogant. He pointed at Adele and shouted, "Why should I listen to you? Adele's expression instantly changed. Don't point your finger at me, or I'll break it. The boy, still a child, was immediately intimidated. Though he wasn't truly a bad kid, he was simply spoiled by his family. Watching him scurry away in panic, Adele couldn't help but think of Caden. I wonder if he's doing well. The man was a cold beauty adored by everyone, but he wasn't interested in women. Then a woman with a smile that could bewitch people appeared, breaking all his principles. Gillian didn't like lively environments, but Adele brought children to observe the training. When the captain was about to leave, Gillian stopped him from doing so. He decided to stay. To get the kids to study well, she painted him as a mischievous child rather than a prodigy. When the kids asked questions, Gillian didn't expose her lies. Even during group prayers, he made sure to sit close to her. Is this seat taken? But Adele kept her distance, as Rebecca was watching her closely. As soon as Gillian sat down, she asked, I know you dislike me, so you assigned me to look after the kids. Gillian felt awkward. He really thought the job was light and easy. But this time, he didn't deny it. I assigned you there because... But before he could finish, Rebecca from the prayer podium called on Adele to lead the reading. She even specified the chapter. Adele smiled politely, but inwardly muttered, how did it go? Quick, remember. Then, a low voice came to her aid. If you show your true self again, someone will surely fall in love with you. She realized Gillian was standing beside her, quietly giving her support. As the icy facade began to melt, a letter arrived from the Archbishop, informing them he would arrive at the cathedral in 2 days. Unlike his initial eagerness, Gillian now felt a hint of disappointment. They wouldn't be celebrating for long. Miss Adele will be returning home soon. Hearing this, Gillian snapped back to reality. He almost forgot why she came here. It was to find a husband to marry back home. Meanwhile, Michael was still talking to himself, saying how Reynard had been visiting Miss Adele every day to win her affection. Hearing this, Gillian couldn't sit still. He ran out. Sure enough, he saw the two laughing together at the training ground. Seeing her laugh with another man, he felt an inexplicable irritation. Realizing what Reynard was doing, he demonstrated a sword move himself. With a swift motion, he struck a nearby tree, making it fall instantly. Amidst the dust, he remained calm. Is this the kind of demonstration you meant? He then lectured Reynard, if you're going to demonstrate, do it right. Live up to the trust and opportunities given to you. Little Reynard, who had lost the spotlight, felt disheartened. Then, the children came over and pulled him away. Once it was just the two of them, Gillian began lecturing Adele. As the successor of a merchant group, you should choose people wisely. Reynard is not suitable for training the kids. Adele was bewildered. She wanted to respond, but the wind was too strong, messing up her hair. Noticing this, Gillian turned to block the wind, standing in front of Adele. He looked somewhat melancholy. Finally, he said the words, I assigned you here, not because I dislike you. It's because, he trailed off, might actually like you a bit. With Adele's sharp instincts, this simple explanation, and his previous action of sitting next to her during prayers, revealed his subtle emotional shift toward her. She realized, she was just one step away from winning him over. When she returned to prepare dinner, Adele noticed something. Her family's merchant group had donated a lot to the church, yet every day they ate nothing but potatoes and burnt potatoes, and of very poor quality. So, that evening, with her maid, she decided to split up. She instructed the maid to find someone, while she went to see Rebecca, to raise concerns about the poor food quality. Rebecca was instantly annoyed. Are you accusing me of embezzling the church's money? You're slandering me. To win over the man, she was willing to feed herself to monsters as dinner, because only then would he feel guilty, deepening his feelings for her. After all, penniless, he had thrown her out, only to discover it was all a misunderstanding. Even the coldest ice would melt. So Adele created a setup. She instructed her maid to find the upright captain, while she went to see Rebecca, and pointed out the discrepancy between church spending and meals. She brought her along to confront the supplier. In fact, she trusted Rebecca's character. Although prone to personal grudges, she would never harm the church. It was surely the supplier's deception. Everything went as planned, even when she made the supplier return the stolen money. The man claimed he didn't have it, just as she expected. Fine, so she tossed a stack of cash. Consider it a loan, but from tomorrow, supply properly. This scene, just as planned, was witnessed by Michael. The next day, when everyone was surprised by the sudden feast, Michael went to see the captain. There's something about Miss Adele that I think you should know. Afterward, Gillian arranged a meeting with her, and with a slightly interrogative tone, asked where she had been last night, and what she had done. According to Adele's script, the man before her was supposed to believe she had bribed the supplier, which was why their food quality had improved. At this moment, the woman only needed to avoid explaining. Then, with a look of disappointment, she told him, if you don't trust me, then saying anything would be pointless. If that's the case, I'd better leave voluntarily. Congratulations, your life can return to peace. Saying that, she turned to leave. Gillian's hand, suspended in midair, reached out to stop her. He wanted to abandon everything. All he wanted was to be a holy knight, but her appearance disrupted his detached and serene heart. Miss Adele, please stay. Hearing his call, she turned back dramatically. He finally came, although a bit later than she'd expected. She intentionally turned her beautiful left cheek and asked, did you come looking for me? Did Rebecca say something? I repeatedly told her to stay quiet. In her plan, after he dismissed her, Rebecca, upon learning the truth, would feel indebted to her, and approach him, to reveal the truth. At that moment, upon understanding everything, whether out of guilt or a sense of duty, he would surely come back for her. This tactic of retreating to advance, and creating misunderstandings to deepen feelings, was her play, clear and precise. But there was a moment, and she hesitated. What if he actually took my hand? What would I do? Unfortunately, she miscalculated. I didn't hear her say anything. No matter what she said, it wouldn't change the facts. I came back for you, without seeking anyone's permission. Upon hearing this, Adele was stunned. What she didn't know was, the head priest had returned to the church, and, after briefly understanding the bribery incident, asked to speak privately with Jillian. The priest, accustomed to tales of love, immediately saw through the man's lovesick days. With a few words to provoke him, he aimed to help this naive man, who knew nothing of love, to recognize his feelings. There was already a girl in his heart. Realizing this, Jillian immediately turned to leave the priest. Perhaps, since the first time he met Adele, she had already rooted in his heart. But he bore so many burdens, that he chose to ignore these feelings. Yet, thinking of losing her forever, he couldn't accept it. Before he left, Rebecca did find him, explaining that everyone misunderstood Adele. But the man didn't listen at all. He just ran to find his beloved, and, as he tried to stop her, he gave a well-thought-out explanation. How can you just leave like that? Did you forget to say you wanted to marry me? To inherit her family's fortune and become rich? She had chased this man for 3 streets, begging him to marry her. At first, he refused, but when she truly left, he regretted it. He realized that the little heart that knew nothing of love had already welcomed this sly, mischievous woman. So, holding her hand, he said, "Let me stay by your side from now on." With this direct confession, Adele wanted to laugh. After all, she had worked hard to get this man. But she held back a smile. No, I have to control myself. I can't look too excited. Noticing the shift in her emotions, Jillian softly said, "It's okay, you can smile. You should feel very happy. Because you once said, this marriage could change your life. If you don't smile, I would feel truly regretful." This man, known for his reserved and stoic ways, suddenly spoke with such warmth, it almost overwhelmed her. She then showed the man a little fox she found, trying to change the subject. Unexpectedly, upon seeing it, Jillian clutched his sword. Sensing danger, Adele quickly held the fox tightly. "You can't hurt it." This left the man conflicted. Although he wanted to say it was dangerous, he couldn't resist her joy, so he swallowed his words. After all, as long as he was there, he would protect her. The two then returned to the church. After meeting the priest, they could finally go home to meet their families and hold their engagement ceremony. Now, we have to talk about the male lead's little schemes. In front of the priest, he promptly knelt down, saying, "I hope our marriage will have your blessing." Unlike Adele, who was thinking only of an engagement, he set the commitment to the highest level, wanting, right then and there, to pledge a vow of lifelong devotion under the eyes of God. The priest eagerly agreed, telling Adele, "Since you've chosen to hold hands, you cannot go back on it. Marriage is sacred. Whatever hardships come, or unexpected challenges, you must endure them." To Adele, this sounded odd, as if it was hinting at something. Does this mean Jillian has some flaw? That can't be. I've checked thoroughly myself. His position, his character are excellent. There's no way he has that kind of issue, right? Her possessive younger brother only loves his sister. Yet here she was, about to marry another man. This bad man held her hand and swore before God, "If either of us breaks this sacred bond, then I shall atone with my life." These words sent a chill through Adele. In her mind, this was simply a contract marriage. Why are we gambling with our lives now? She stood silently, not daring to speak. After the vow, Jillian carefully helped her up. The priest stared at her intently, asking if she wanted to add anything to the vow. Seeing she had to say something, she pledged in the name of her family, "No matter what happens in the future, I will make sure that this noble commander at my side has everything he ever wants in life, and never suffers a day." This push and pull left me exclaiming, "Goodness." The woman's trick was to marry the man. The man's trick was to lock her in for life. But once they left the room, Adele started complaining about how the priest could spring that on her. "It's just sudden." The man leaned close and asked, "What's sudden?" Faced with his unexpected closeness, Adele quickly took 2 steps back, explaining that she was only startled by the blessing. What she really meant was that she worried such vows might be problematic and could cause big trouble. Later, while Jillian went to bid farewell to the priest, Adele waited for him in the carriage. Upon seeing him, the priest asked if he was satisfied with his gift. In other words, he meant, "I bound that crafty woman to you. Aren't you going to thank me?" Turns out the vow was a double-edged sword, a blessing or a curse, depending on whether the couple could uphold their lifelong vow. The priest also hinted to Jillian that their relationship would soon be known by the royal family, and when that happens, but Jillian was indifferent. He didn't care, but the priest added, "What if Adele finds out that you're actually a lost prince, and that the little fox was, after all, he was known as the celibate, handsome brother." Wa noi du noi an la mo chong tri lan lung, nung ki an chu dong, an iko the hun den rach kam wa, mo ki da chan noi fu nu kua min, an se kong bao gio buong te, nung ki du, Adele van engai tho gi rang, moi quan he kua ho chi la vi loyik, iak an dong wai kuoiko, la vi ko dung chu tro keo leo, vi vei, tren duong vei, ko chu sao no, va tan dung quang thoi ji an ne, de bo sung cho an mo so keen thuk, du sao, ki zong nui va tro vei na ko, an se phi gap cha ko, va ko lo rang Jillian se ko ung fa, du rang an ki chat phi thuong, lila don trong kua don ki si, o la kong I dam zem thuong an o bat ku do. Nung de tro ton noi dan on ben ko, van lamo tu thach lon, vi ko ko tai san quan yu, I kung se gi an teep kan ko vi tien, ong du ton trong an, hun nua, cha ko, kung kong de bai lua, dung luk du, chu sao no and gong do len, Jillian hoi voi vei to mo, ko luon thich dong vat no nu vei sao, Adele noi rang kong 5a. Adele said it's not like that, but for some reason, seeing this little creature, she couldn't bear to let it go. Previously, there was a hint left, that this fox is not simple. In reality, it's a dragon sealed away, holding something Jillian had been seeking for a long time. Suddenly, Adele realized she hadn't named it. Without a moment's hesitation, the man said, this name suits it best. Adele thought the name was a bit cheesy, as she held the little fox, and looked into its eyes. Suddenly, Jillian took the little creature away. If you keep holding it, it'll get spoiled. Education should be the priority. It seems I'll be responsible for teaching our kids in the future. This remark made me blush. Soon, they entered the city. They were about to reach the Earl's mansion. Adele put up her hair, extended her hand. Now, let me show you the battlefield of my life. Upon arriving home, she put away her smile, first getting the latest news from the butler, then asking when her father would return. Finally, to everyone's surprise, she entered the same room as Jillian. For his first time visiting his girlfriend's home, he entered her room right away. Outside, he was the cold and abstinent holy knight, but with her, he was completely calm. For example, when Adele asked him, "Are you really not interested in desserts? They're fragrant and sweet. Just being close can make you lose your senses." Hearing this, he leaned closer to her. "I'm very interested. How could I not like something so fragrant and sweet?" The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. Unfortunately, she was as straight as an arrow, not understanding his hint at all. Instead, she put down her teacup, and told him to come closer. Jillian suddenly paused, asking her what she intended. Adele explained that her father was very perceptive, and as a couple, if they kept their distance, he'd get suspicious. Before she could finish, he moved closer to her. "Like this? You can hold my arm." Adele was pleased with his response, thinking it was a good choice to marry him. Jillian was both handsome and upright, smart and considerate. At this moment, the maid announced that the Earl had returned. Adele tried to withdraw her hand, but he held on. "You don't have to hide. You're my fiancé now." These words made her heart skip a beat. She was determined to protect him. Why am I the one panicking? So she repeated her reminder. Her father was truly difficult to deal with. She was about to say more when the door was suddenly pushed open. "Find out who blew up the bridge. I want him torn to pieces." Hearing the man's voice, Adele immediately let go of Jillian's arm, and turned to link arms with someone else. "Father, you're finally back. Why so late?" The Earl was furious. Someone had blown up his main bridge, and he wanted Caden to stew the culprit alive. Adele just smiled and stayed silent. She couldn't let her brother Caden cook himself. At that moment, her father asked, "Where's Jared?" He brought many engagement gifts, waiting to prepare for the ceremony. But Jared was nowhere to be seen. Only a stranger was present. "Greeting, Earl Sergio." The old man silently stared at him for 3 seconds. "Though I know you resemble me." After one look at the man, he was captivated by his appearance. He instantly forgave his daughter's antics, for this man was no ordinary person. "My name is Jillian, soon to be Miss Adele's first and last fiancé." Though slightly bewildered, the father knew her partner wasn't this man before. Had he been swapped out? But he gave her no chance to explain. He immediately approved of the engagement switch, to so easily gain the consent of her scheming, profit-driven father. Adele could hardly believe it. Even long after her father had left, she stood there dumbfounded, until Jillian reminded her, "It's all settled now, have some tea." Since they were similar, if she could fall in love at first sight, why couldn't her father? Perhaps the Earl was very pleased with his son-in-law. These words left her with no retort. She could only say, "Ah, yes, yes." At that moment, the man voiced his curiosity. "Your father just mentioned trickery." Adele immediately clarified, "I despise such behavior. Once married, you should stay committed, even if pure love is somewhat foolish. Since compared to love, many people value career and family more. But unless it's absolutely necessary, I won't consider divorce." The first part was fine, but the word divorce stung Jillian. However, he didn't show it. He just said it was enough that she wasn't fickle. "Because I'm not a fickle person either." His eyes sparkled, but hers only reflected his. As the atmosphere grew tense, the man suddenly stood up. "The Earl wants to speak with me alone." Adele panicked. She wanted to go with him. She feared her father might make things difficult, but Jillian reassured her to relax, while straightening her collar. "How is it that you look stunning in everything?" His compliment made her blush. She let him go, but the moment he left, she regretted it. Adele let down her bun, and asked the maid to bring something over.